Yaakov continues his journey, fleeing his parental home to avoid the danger coming from his bloodthirsty brother Esav. Having just completed the famous dream of the heavenly bound ladder with the angels going up and going down, the Torah continues and tells us in the beginning of Perek Kaf Tes how Yaakov's journey continues eastward, and how then he sees Vayar V'hine Be'er Basadeh. He sees a well, and not only a well, he sees flocks of sheep lying beside it, a stone, an even, a big stone, Al Pia Be'er, covering the mouth of the well. He then sees how they would roll the stone off the well, and eventually shepherds come with their flocks to water them. Yaakov engages them in conversation, and when he finds out they're from Haran, he immediately asks them, "Do you know my relative? Do you know my kinsman Lavan?" They say that not only do we know him, look, here comes his daughter Rachel. The story unfolds with Yaakov helping in the watering of Rachel's sheep. Eventually they begin conversation. Yaakov eventually is taken home to meet her father, and we all know how the story ends. The incredible courtship, the love story with Rachel, the tragic story with Leah, and how eventually they become a unified family. And the rest, as they say, is history. It's easy to overlook this initial recounting the story at the well. After all, everything that happens with Yaakov and the two sisters in Lavan's house, and of course before that, the dream with the ladder, these are seminal, incredible, important events in the life of the Torah, the Avos. But in this little story tucked in between, the transition story, as he meets the shepherds at the well, and eventually there Rachel, the Baal HaTurim, one of the great medieval commentaries from the 13th and 14th century, Baal HaTurim notices and points our attention to the fact that this story didn't just happen to take place near a well, but the Torah in these few psukim mention the word Be'er, or some form of it, 7 different times. In fact, the Baal HaTurim continues and says 5 of the times it says Ha-Be'er with the He HaYediyah, and 3 of the times it describes something happening on the well, Al Pi Ha-Be'er. 7 overall, 5 with the He, 3 Al Pi. And the Baal HaTurim continues in an insight which is characteristic of his general commentary, which focuses very much on numerology. Says the Baal HaTurim, this is not a coincidence. The 7, 5, and 3 are actually ramazim, subtle hints embedded in the Torah text that allude to the following. The 7 refers to the 7 aliyos when we read the Torah on Shabbos. The 5 to the 5 aliyos when we read the Torah on Yantif. And the 3 referring to, hinting at the 3 aliyos when we read the Torah during the week. This is the observation, the insight of the Baal HaTurim. And while it's on the one hand fascinating, it is cryptic to say the least. What could there possibly be a connection? How could there be a connection? What could the connection be between how many aliyos we give at various times for the Torah and this story of the well and Yaakov meeting the shepherds and eventually Rachel? Rav Moshe Feinstein, in the Sefer Darash Moshe, suggests that in fact what is being conveyed by this brief insight of the Baal HaTurim is in fact a fundamental and significant lesson in life and in Jewish thought. Think about it. Yaakov spent most of his life in a spiritual cocoon, living in the house of Yitzchak. According to tradition, according to Chazal and our Masorah, his initial foray outside the house had him spend 14 more years in what is known as Yeshivas Shem Ve'ever, that ancient biblical yeshiva which transmitted whatever it meant to study Torah in those days, and it's hard to understand what that means, but this is a tradition that we had. He's now well into his 70s, and he sees this Be'er Mayim, this well of water. And it's not just that he sees the well of water, he sees, and the Torah is describing it, how people work, how they have flocks of sheep, they tend the sheep, they feed the sheep, they give the sheep water to drink, and he understands that in fact something significant is going on, perhaps something he never realized in the spiritual cocoon that was the first stage of his life. And that is, Sherotzon Hashem Yisbarach Sheyasku B'Yeshuva Shalolam. V'nimsa She'osin B'zeh Rotzon Hashem. He sees people not just earning a parnasa, making a living. They're doing that. But more than that, they're doing something that's meaningful. They're tending to the land. They're building up society, building an economy. And that is something that is actually meaningful in the eyes of Hashem, says Rav Moshe Feinstein. Yaakov understood that this is Ratzon Hashem, to be Osek B'Yeshivo Shalolam. Hashem did not create the world to be empty or even or underdeveloped. Rather, he wants, of course, within proper ethical and halachic frameworks, Hashem wants the world to be developed. And Yaakov, for the first time, understands that beyond just learning Torah, there's other things which are spiritually valuable and respected by Hashem. And there's nothing wrong with that. But, says Rav Moshe, Yaakov understood, and we need to understand, there can be a danger that comes along with that. And that is if we get so caught up in the genuine goodness of being Osek B'Yeshuva Shalolam that we forget about Torah. And therefore, exactly at this moment, Yaakov, so to speak, reminded himself almost subliminally, and we, the Torah texts, are supposed to be remembering that as much as we are also supposed to be like Yaakov, understanding and respecting, being involved in commerce and economy, we can never forget the importance of Kriyas HaTorah, having our focus in our professional life built on a foundation of regular and periodic Torah study. That's why within every 3 days, Chazal are matakein, Shabbos, Monday, Thursday, Torah study. Because in order for all of our work to have meaning, it has to be based on something that's even more important, and that is a spiritual and ethical foundation. Yaakov understood this lesson, and we need to learn the lesson from his observation as well.